begin. We have to begin this show today back with the NFL season, the Chiefs and the Browns, obviously the Cowboys and the Buccaneers. I'm not going to touch on that game that took place on Thursday, but that obviously kind of commenced the start of the 2021-2022 NFL season. The two teams that were featured, the Super Bowl champs and the biggest brand in American sports, and the Cowboys and maybe one of the largest brands in worldwide sports. That got things started off Thursday. And so, of course, the marquee matchup next would feature the runner-up in the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs, against arguably the team that, viewed by many in the Cleveland Browns, might be the most talented team from top to bottom when you look at the roster. Them and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers might have the most complete rosters in the NFL. And obviously, we know that the Cleveland Browns were kind of the heartwarming team, the heartwarming story of the NFL last year. This is a team that hadn't reached the postseason since 2002. They won a playoff game for the first time in their franchise's history, just the third time that they had even reached the postseason in their franchise's history. And how did they come out? Well, they came out the same way that they kind of burst onto the scene last year, which is they established the run. That was kind of their identity. That was the thing that kind of transformed the Cleveland Browns from a couple seasons ago to where they ultimately were, was their ability to establish the run, maintain that level of physicality that was needed. Nick Chubb was fantastic on the ground, 15 carries, 83 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5.5 yards per carry. That's what makes the Cleveland Browns who they are. That's what has been their main kind of form of identity since they burst onto the scene last year. But the thing that the Browns were doing so well, and the reason why their run game was working so effectively, it was because of their ability to control the pace of the game, control the clock, keeping Mahomes and the Chiefs offense on the sidelines. But there was never a feeling watching that game yesterday that the Kansas City Chiefs were completely out of it. And this is a sentiment that I've echoed numerous times watching the Chiefs, is you just don't get the sense that they're out of a game, even when they're trailing by 12 at home, 12 at halftime. You just never get the sense that they are, because their offense is so explosive that it actually can kind of intimidate opponents. And that's pretty much what happened, because you have all these methodical, strategic, calculated drives being executed perfectly by the Browns. They're eating up 7 minutes, 14 plays, 75-yard drives, resulting in a touchdown. And then it's 29-20. Looks like the Browns have some sense of control of this game. And one play, 75-yard touchdown pass from Mahomes to Tyreek Hill. And all of a sudden you look up and it's back to a 2-point game. And then that's kind of when the avalanche began to ensue and the deluge happened, is because now you've got the Browns saying to themselves, well, it just took us 7 minutes to go the length of the field, and they struck on one play. That was the turning point in the game, because that was psychologically when the advantage shifted from the road team completely to the home team. It was after that where you have the botched punt, where I'm surprised that their punter didn't even get it off. He still had time. Even when he mishandled the snap, he could have at least kicked it up, and instead he tried to pretend to be a runner. I don't really know what he was thinking there. Chiefs obviously scored. Mahomes found Kelsey. The ensuing possession for the Browns was when Baker Mayfield, who actually had been playing really well up until that point, had a really great game, threw that third down pass perfectly into the hands of his wide receiver Schwartz, who dropped it. Chiefs score touchdown. And then you have the final possession, the potential game-winning drive for Baker Mayfield. And he makes an ill-advised throw because he's pressured and he's tripped from behind, cut down underneath. I don't know if he was trying to throw it away. Probably should have just taken a sack. And that's when he throws the interception to Mike Hughes, who was actually acquired by the Chiefs in the offseason from the Minnesota Vikings. And so it was that initial play, though, at 29-20 to 20 that changed the course of the game. That's what changed the course of the game. And one of the things that the Chiefs have always been known for, has been their staple, has been how explosive they are on offense. That's kind of been their MO for several years. That's what's made them who they are. That's what's made Patrick Mahomes the ultimate wild card, is because you know that within any given play, he can strike gold. And this is a guy in Patrick Mahomes now who in the month of September has 35 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and is 11-0. The guy simply as a starter has not lost in the month of September. He comes out clicking on all cylinders. He comes out locked in every single season. And what it comes down to is you can have everything right. You can feel like your team is more complete from top to bottom, just like the Browns probably feel like they've got the better roster. But it's because of that one guy, the one difference maker in Patrick Mahomes at the quarterback position, that ultimately the Chiefs are just better than the Browns. And the Browns have everything else perfectly in place. Perfect harmony, great defense, best offensive line, tremendous running game, elite wide receivers. And even though Baker Mayfield is a good quarterback, he is a good quarterback, he's not on the level of Patrick Mahomes. And while most teams aren't, that's the difference. And that's why ultimately the Chiefs are better than the Browns. And it showed yesterday because they managed to pull it through. And this is precisely why I believe that in retrospect, it might have been the best thing in the world that the Kansas City Chiefs ultimately lost that Super Bowl. Because the reality is, what it did was it restored that chip on their shoulder. Because one of the hardest things to do in the NFL is to manufacture motivation, hunger, desire. It's so much harder to convince a team and to convince players that have won a Super Bowl, that have reached the mountaintop, hey, we want you to be more fired up and more motivated to enter a new NFL season, as opposed to the guys that lost in the Super Bowl. It's harder to fabricate that. It's harder to manufacture more attention to detail, more hunger and desire to win if you're on the winning end, if you're the victor. Which is why in NFL history, we've only seen 7 teams repeat as Super Bowl champs. The New England Patriots are the most recent example in 2004 and 2005. But that's why this was so critical, I think, for the Chiefs to actually, in hindsight, lose the Super Bowl, is because it restored that desire. It restored that chip on their shoulder that, hey, we got exposed in the Super Bowl. Our offensive line was ravaged by injuries, and the Chiefs were narrowly beating teams last year, relying simply on the heroics of Patrick Mahomes. And while a lot of that can be said for yesterday, the number one target is the Tampa Bay Bucks now. It's not the Chiefs. And so I think that in a lot of ways, now when you look at the Kansas City Chiefs, you're saying here's a team that seems locked in, that seems dialed in, and they're not going to necessarily rest on their laurels like they may have had or they may have done last season. Even though last season, it still carried them a long way. They went all the way to the Super Bowl. And again, if it wasn't for a porous offensive line that was ravaged by injuries, because again, their offensive line was good, but they were depleted, they probably would have won that Super Bowl. And so what did they do? They went back to the things that made them so successful, buffering that offensive line. They went out and acquired Orlando Brown from the Ravens. They signed Austin Blythe. They signed Joe Thuney from the Patriots. They paid him an exorbitant sum. Excuse me. That's what they did. And so they got back to what made them such a good team to start off with. It was a gritty win for the Chiefs. Nice job by them setting the tone to start the new NFL season. And it's what you have to do. You have to find a way to win. And I think that the Browns are a really good team. They're an excellent team. I think they're probably the second or third best team in the AFC. But this showed the disparity between the two. It showed the disparity between the two.